Mac Voices TV is brought to you by PDF Pen for iPad from Smile, the mobile version of the award-winning Mac PDF editor. Use it to sign a contract, make corrections, fill out an application, make comments on a presentation, and much more. It's the mobile app that doesn't feel like you left the important features back at the office. Welcome to MacNotables. This is the home of the Mac experts you want to hear from. I'm Chuck Joyner, and after an absence that is entirely my fault, is Mr. Jim Dalrymple of The Loop back with us. Jim, it's great to talk to you.
How you doing, Chuck?
I'm doing great. It's great to talk to you, and I swear one of these days I'm going to figure out a way to manipulate my calendar so we do this constantly.
You know, it's certainly not your fault. I mean, we just keep missing each other, and you know, it was nice just a little while ago to talk to you on Twitter. I mean, that's how bad things are getting. You know?
Well, you're just this media mogul now.
No, I'm just sitting here doing my thing. You know,
It seems to be going really well. The Loop seems to be growing, and different things keep happening, and you just keep easing it up a notch every so often.
I've really been enjoying it. I've been having a lot of fun. You know, posting and writing and finding interesting things for people to have a look at, and playing guitar and, you know, writing about the whole music aspect of it too.
Jim, we've talked about it before, but it continues to impress me how the Loop is Mac-centric, but it's rather eclectic in the way it covers things, and it is also a different kind of editorial than we see other places. You sort of reach out, grab something, give the Jim Dalrymple pronouncement on it, and move on.
Well, and really, I think that's the right way to do it, because if somebody has already written a good story, I don't need to go out and rewrite their story. I should send people to that story. If it's not any good, then why would I send my readers to see it in the first place? You know, if there's things that I want to explain and there's enough of them, then I may take the story and, you know, break up little pieces of it and write a little bit more myself. But I think that what people are looking for is my take on the story, and I can do that in a couple of lines or a couple of paragraphs and, you know, send them to read a good story. Unless it's a crappy story, and then I send them to read that, but I warn them first.
Yeah, usually, again, with a little bit of judgment or pronouncement on just how crappy it is.
Exactly. But I think they expect that too.
Jim, we haven't talked for so long, and a number of stories have crossed the Loop that I'm kind of curious to get your take on where the iPad and the iPhone are. Are they as dominant as we seem to think and as the numbers tend to indicate? Or do you think there's any significant, I'm not sure I want to say threat, but do you think that Android and some of the other options out there really represent a significant alternative for most people?
There's two things there: a significant alternative or a significant threat. Sure, Android offers an alternative to the iPad, and for people that don't like Apple, and there are still some of those out there, sure, Android is an alternative. But you know, not having anything is an alternative too. You could always do that. You might get more done. But with the iPad, it seems to be dominant in just about everything. I mean, the other day, Friday maybe, a story came out that showed that the iPad had 95%, I think, of web traffic, tablet web traffic. I mean, that's just huge. People that are buying the iPad are not only buying it and using the apps and doing different things on it that they can do through the App Store, but they're surfing the web and they're getting email and they're doing, you know, all that kind of stuff too. So clearly there's quite a wide range of uses that people are getting at it. I just don't see where Android and, you know, that piece of crap that RIM has, I just don't see where those are really coming into the market at all. They don't really seem to be doing anything. And that's what I think it comes down to with the iPad. And the iPhone seems to be just the same. I mean, every time you hear a carrier say, yeah, our top selling device is the iPhone. Well, I mean, well, I can't remember if it was AT&T or Sprint. Somebody just announced over the last week that the iPhone had more sales than all of their Android phones combined. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves when it comes to things like that. You can say all you want that, well, Android has a bigger OS base, that has more phones. Well, Apple only sells 3 phones, so okay, it's got more user base, but they're not selling more. Samsung is doing pretty well, but Samsung it basically is just a photocopier of whatever Apple does. So, they put Android on it and copy Apple's hardware and think that that's okay. RIM is not doing well. HTC is falling. None of the other companies really seem to be able to catch Apple. So, yeah, the iPhone is everything that we think it is, and the iPad too, and it's only going to continue. That's the thing with these. You take what Apple has done. Apple is already a decade ahead of everybody when it comes to the foundation of what they've built. And they built that on iTunes, and then they released the iPad, but they have video, or the iPod, I mean, which gave them a good test. But then they have videos, and they have music, and they have TV shows, and nobody else can offer all of these things all together. They have iCloud. It's just everything now. And with Mountain Lion, now you're bringing all that stuff onto your desktop, pictures. It's just, you download an app from your desktop, and it automatically downloads onto your iPhone and iPad. That type of integration is not matched anywhere in the industry.
Jim, as Apple-centric people, I'm not going to call us fanboys, but just we have been focused on Apple for a long time. Do you think that the issues or the challenges to the interaction that you just talked about and all, the walled garden thing, that it locks you in, you think that's a reasonable challenge right now, or is that just something that is trying to be used to challenge?
Well, I mean, sure, there is a walled garden, and without that walled garden, we would have, hundreds of pieces of malware like Android does. And so you can go for that if you want, or you can stay in the walled garden. And when the all of the malware was first noticed and reported on, I wrote a piece at that time that said, I don't mind the walled garden. I would rather have this and know that things are safe than be wondering, well, should I download this app? And really, I'm happy with it. There's nothing that I feel restricted in doing because Apple protects the App Store. So if they want to protect it and keep a walled garden up and make sure that the apps run right, then I'm okay with that. And, Apple has made some mistakes, and I've been one of the first ones to jump on them when they have. But, they kicked apps out, they did different things, but, that things like that haven't happened in quite a while to, the significance that they did at the beginning. So I'm good with it. I think what they're doing is just fine.
And I'm not apologizing for Apple for it, but with the growth that they were seeing, the deployment of things and all of that, you almost felt like there had to be some mistakes. There had to be a couple things that maybe upon second thought they wouldn't have done. And for the most part, they've gone back and corrected those. You're right. And confess, I hadn't thought about it. We haven't seen one of those stories about something getting kicked out unreasonably in recent weeks, months.
But we have seen Apple still policing the store in situations where one developer had 1,000 apps, and they just kicked him out entirely, all of his apps. They've kicked out, or they're dealing with some of the copycat apps. That's all stuff that needs to be done. Apple definitely needs to look after that. I mean, you can't have an original app, an original idea, and then have somebody come in with a similar name, who does exactly the same thing, and just try and steal those ideas. But they're working through it, and the explosive growth that they did have is something that Yeah, you have to try and understand because this has never been done before. And I know that people get upset with it. And, I get upset with iTunes when I plug in my iPhone and it doesn't update properly or something happens. And yeah, I get upset just like everybody else. But, when things are running smooth, which is 99% of the time, you just go ahead and do your thing. You plug your phone in. Like today, I updated to the OS today on my iPhone and my iPad. It, both of them just worked. Just went off like nothing. Great.
Yeah, there's that phrase, it just works.
Yeah,
And that's all of us want.
that's what we want. I mean, you look at the different versions of Android, and they're selling Android phones now that can't be updated. You got to wonder why people would buy stuff like that. Excuse me. I wouldn't. I would buy something that I knew could be updated. I mean, even today, I bought RAM today from OWC. Great company. They told me if you buy this RAM for, I bought 16 gigs, so I think it was like $139. If you buy this RAM, you probably won't be able to use it in future generation Macs because it was the older RAM. Okay. So what RAM can I buy that I could use? And they said, well, that 16 gig is $142. It was like $3 more or something. It wasn't the big sell of, well, that's going to be 200. It was like $3 more, and you probably can use this. Of course, they can't guarantee it because they don't know what Apple's doing. But looking back at history and things like that, so I spent the extra $3 and got that RAM because if a new computer does come out and I do happen to get one of those, I can use that RAM and upgrade. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's in everybody's mind when they go buy things. How long am I going to be able to use this? Is it a month, a year, 10 years? And when you look at the Android phones, they're basically at their end of life now because you'll never be able to put a new operating system on.
Yeah, you hear all the advantages of Android, that it's an open market, that it's open source, that everybody can contribute. There are no restrictions on what you'll be able to do with your phone. And as you pointed out, the malware, but really more importantly, it shows the disadvantage of having somebody shepherding the platform. Admittedly, it can go a lot of different ways, and that can be a very good thing, but it also can be a very fragmented thing, and especially from the consumer standpoint, where I buy a phone, and I think because it's Android, I'll have these key five advantages, and all of a sudden I don't because, well, that version of the hardware is not going to support this version of the OS or this app, whatever, and it falls apart.
And it's just crazy, isn't it? I mean, if you walk into an Apple store, what you see there is the latest products with the latest software, not old software. I mean, there's nothing in an Apple store running OS 9. I mean, you get the latest stuff right there. And chances are you'll be able to upgrade any of that gear, whether it's an iPhone, iPad, or a Mac, for 2, maybe 3 years to come. I think that's a pretty safe bet with iPhones and iPads. With Macs, it's probably even longer. So, and that's what we need. We need to be able to walk into a store, get the greatest thing that they have, walk out and know that, okay, for the next 2 or 3 years, I'm good. We can upgrade if we want in between, but to know that we're good.
Along those lines, Jim, do you think that, because you're right, it can easily last 2 or 3 years, especially for the average user. You and I may be different because of what we do and also because we like to play with it. But do you think Apple is starting to abandon hardware too fast with the OS upgrades? Or is that just the nature of the speed at which technology is advancing? It just doesn't make sense to try to give a longer tail.
I would rather Apple give us the features and give us, the things that we need to be able to grow and be able to do the work that we want, than to try and hang back. I mean, that's what Microsoft did. Microsoft tried to hang back and have backward compatibility with everything, and it ruined it. So I'm all for, and any developer that asks me, I always say, cut it off. And if you can offer some really cool new features, then by all means cut off the OS requirements and move ahead with, from now on, this is what you need. Because if you don't do it, somebody else will. Somebody else will come along and say, okay, this app over here, it can have the backward compatibility, but we can do all these cool things, but you need the latest OS to do it. Yeah, do it. Just cut off. It's unfortunate, but cut off the old people, and well, not the old people.
Yeah, careful there. We're both in trouble now.
Not the old people, but the old OS. Cut those off and move ahead with the app. That's what people want. If you see that all of the apps that you want to use have these great new versions, then chances are you're going to upgrade your equipment. If everything is tailing off so that you can continue to use it on your old gear, then what reason do you really have to upgrade? And besides, it doesn't look like the software industry is really moving anywhere. Whereas, we've seen over the past 3 or 4 years incredible jumps in the software industry, not only for the Mac, but iOS too. iOS has just been crazy. It's been so good.
Yeah, it does seem like there's been a new economy started with this, and it shows no signs of slowing down. If anything, I think that's where, as a developer, you at least want to have one foot, because there's not only are there so many more of the devices out there, but everybody is going toward these devices, even if it's not as a primary machine, as a supplemental machine or just a mobile machine.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, everybody seems to have multiple devices these days, and that's great. I have my MacBook Air that I just got back from Ireland. Took my MacBook Air. I also took my iPad and my iPhone. Because I can use them all under different circumstances. When I'm at home, it's easy. I can just go grab whatever I want. But on the road, you never know. You might be able to go for a walk in the park and use your iPad and go for a walk around town. Of course, I always have my iPhone with me, so it was great, and I like that. And most households, I think these days, do have more than one device, whether that's a smartphone and a computer, or some people now are just getting iPads.
I've been called out a couple times by people who see me with my iPad out at a restaurant or wherever, and my iPhone out. And it's like, well, this is just the equivalent of two screens at home. Yeah, one's a little smaller, but there's a distinct advantage, and especially since that is one place that the iOS not falls down, but just hasn't evolved yet to something that is a little more multitasking or able to have two things on screen. And of course, we could go off on a big tangent as to whether that's a good idea or not, but at the end of the day, for a lot of things, it's very useful to have one app open over here and another app open over here.
Well, and I think that people need to understand that, it's not, having an iPad and an iPhone is not the same as having, in the old days, a Palm and a telephone. It's different now, because the iPhone, to me, I can do whatever I need to do on the iPhone, but if I need to do some typing, or I need to do some, I'm going to sit down and write a story outside, I'll do that on my iPad, simply because it's more convenient. It's got a bigger screen, and I can. Why wouldn't I? But I have typed and posted stories remotely on my iPhone. Not because I wanted to test it, because only a fool would want to test that, but because it was out of necessity. This is what I needed to do. If I wanted to get this story up, I had to do it on my iPhone, and I did. And it wasn't the prettiest thing in the world, but it worked, and that's all that I want. And that was with one of the original iPhones too. So now it's even faster, it's better, the apps are better. So yeah, I mean, things start to change and grow and shift, and the market shifts, and Apple's moving along with it. But just as important, the developers are moving along with it. They're coming out with these new ideas of apps, and they continually, I think that they're bumping up against the hardware. of what the hardware is capable of with some of these games and science applications and math applications. And I don't worry too much about that because I don't know anything about science or math. But you know,
Yeah, well,
some people would worry about that.
Jim, you when we were talking about Apple's ecosystem, you mentioned iCloud, and I'm very anxious to hear what you think of iCloud now and where it's going. MobileMe is about to be shut down in a month or so, and clearly that it wasn't quite a misstep. It was just not a good implementation. I don't know if it was ahead of its time or what, but Dropbox, for the most part, and a couple of the other online services kind of have eaten its lunch. Now it has even more competition from Google, from Microsoft, from Yahoo. Or no, excuse me, not Yahoo, but SugarSync, Box.com, which used to be Box.net, Spider Oak. I mean, you can just go on and on. They're all over the place. Given that it's an Apple branded service, do you think that's all it needs, or does Apple really have to get its act together and make this a more useful part of that ecosystem?
You see, I mean, if you look at the history of this, it went from iTools, which was free, to .Mac, which you paid for, to MobileMe, which you paid for, and now iCloud. And probably MobileMe was getting close to what I think people really wanted, but Apple just didn't deliver. I mean, this was a misstep by Apple. MobileMe was, and .Mac for that matter, just they just didn't deliver at all. And I don't know if it was because they put out things like cards and calendars, but then didn't really do anything with them. It just kind of sat there. And I think that what they were trying to get to at some point was iCloud. And they're here now. So now we get to see if all of the work that they've done can actually release something useful. I think that it will. Now, I've been an iTools user, .Mac and MobileMe and iCloud. And I like them because of the syncing capabilities. So for me, my tests for these services may be a bit different than most because I don't really store things. I just sync things. And I want what MobileMe or what iCloud does for me now. I'm using Mountain Lion on my laptop, so pictures automatically come in. The integration with iCloud and Mountain Lion is incredible. It's really great. So that's what I want. I want, when I buy an app for iCloud, to put it on all of my devices. When I take a picture, I want it to be on all of my devices. That's the kind of stuff that I want from iCloud. Calendaring has to get better. Address book, there's apps that need to get better and need to do things more efficiently. But the basics, the fundamentals of what I want it to do are there. So I'm happy with that. When I change a calendar appointment on my laptop, it's changed on my phone. So I'm not going to run out and then later on in the day say, oh, I had that appointment, but it changed. Or if you change 2 or 3 of them, then you're kind of messed up. But since it always changes with you, you're good. And that's what I like. For me, that's worth paying for, and now it's free. So,
And I agree with everything you've said, but I'm not sure that I could agree with you if you were talking about documents in the same way, because iCloud, unless I just haven't come to understand it properly yet, just doesn't do what Dropbox does for me. And that is, if I want to have a document on all my devices, or at least accessible from all my devices, I put it one place, and within literally a few seconds, if it's not too big, it's there waiting for me. And I don't find that with iCloud, at least not yet.
well, iCloud documents in the cloud. I can open a document on my iPad, and then open a document on from the cloud from like Pages or Numbers or something like that. So it doesn't seem to have the sharing capabilities maybe that Dropbox does, and I use Dropbox too. because a lot of people use Dropbox. And for instance, with this party that I'm doing, the designer of the invitations and stuff is using Dropbox to share documents with me so that we can coordinate what's going on. So it's perfect. It really works good for that. And kind of funny that Steve tried to buy Dropbox, and they said no. So I don't know if I would have said no.
Yeah, in a way, I wish they hadn't said no, but that's another thing.
I might have said sure.
Yeah. All right, so everybody listening, say it with me. What party, Jim?
Ah, the WWDC party. I'm putting on for developers and press on June the 12th. My first party. This is my first party, so it's a big deal for me.
Well, I thought I heard something about that you weren't putting on the party, that the beard was putting on the party, and you were just invited.
That's true. I don't even know if I'm invited, really. My wife and my daughter are going to come out.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah. So that's great. It's going to be a good time, and it's going to be a great party. We have a live band, and went all out for this one. So people should have a really good time.
Jim, what do you expect, other than the party, to come out of WWDC? I know you're not exactly in the business of predictions, but maybe I'll just ask for expectations.
I think WDC is going to be about a cross between Mountain Lion and iOS. In previous WDCs, we've seen one or the other, but this is really the first one where I think Apple can talk about both, and say, because Mountain Lion has so much integration with iCloud and with iOS, that it's reasonable for them to come out and talk about both and show people how they're going to be able to interact. So that's what I think we'll see. Overall, I mean, it's going to be about. I mean, you have to remember that this is a developer conference. Developers write code for software, and some hardware too. But fundamentally, this is an operating system show. It's not like a trade show where you release all kinds of little goodies. And Apple has released some goodies in the past. They've released all kinds of things, iPods and all kinds of stuff at WWDC. So I wouldn't rule out any releases. But I think the main focus of the show is going to be on the two operating systems and how they're coming together.
And it also feels like WWDC sets the tone for the coming year as to informing Apple's developer community about where they're going to take the operating systems and where they're hoping everybody will follow. In some years that has been very well received. Other years it's been met with a bit of skepticism, or at times maybe even just a touch of hostility. But I'd like to think that those days are gone for the most part.
I think they are. I mean, there was some touchy subjects there for a while. I mean, when Apple moved from OS 9 to a new architecture and OS 10, and then they moved from PowerPC or the IBM chips over to Intel. There was some pretty tough times there where developers weren't happy. But I think for the most part, we're beyond that now. I mean, Apple has so many developers now that want to make great apps. And, that was lean for a while too. You and I remember those times very well, where, Windows would have all kinds of apps and the Mac wouldn't. Well, now, the Mac is putting out new apps and iOS is putting out new apps every day, all kinds of them. And they're good quality stuff, so much so that Windows developers are copying them to put them on. And a lot of mobile apps are coming out on iOS first, and then they're coming out for Android or well, I was going to say BlackBerry, but nobody puts out apps for BlackBerry. So yeah, Android.
Okay, Jim, you're forcing me into it. That's two shots you've taken at RIM, and I haven't asked about your thoughts on RIMs, on the recent developments. And it's been a while since we've talked, and man, there have been a lot of them. Have any of them been good? Is there anything out there?
No, I even stopped really writing about RIM. Before I used to write stories about RIM. Now I just say more stupid from RIM. And what was it? Maybe 2 weeks ago in Australia, a bus load of people pulled up outside of one of Apple's stores, and everybody got out of the bus with these signs that they held up, and it said "Wake up," and everybody thought it was Samsung. Even I thought it was Samsung because it was an organized protest, and we know that RIM isn't organized enough to put on a protest. And as it turns out, they hired somebody over there to do it. And it came today that they put out this message to Apple that, not it, going into business isn't for everybody, and you need to wake up and, innovate and stuff like that. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, really? Really, you're going to say that to Apple, the one company that is innovating in the technology market today, and you're going to say that to them? And RIM is on its last legs. I mean, it's on its stumps, and they come out with something like this. They should have just saved their money and bought everybody in the company a sandwich or something. They would have been better off.
Yeah, that one. That one was kind of a mystery. I mean, and taking nothing at all away from our friends in Australia, but doing it in Australia, doing it sort of not exactly undercover, but without a big RIM sign there saying, we want people to wake up. I mean, if they'd have gone with the in-your-face thing, I think it would have played better. But as it was, it almost seemed like they were trying to sucker punch, and they didn't have the strength to even break a wet paper bag.
No, and I don't think it would have went over well no matter what they did, unfortunately for them, because RIM has lost so much respect from everybody in the market, not just analysts, but users. Nobody really has any respect for them anymore. And for them to go out and do something like they did today just shows that it's bad. It's really bad. And even their publicity stunts fall flat, and that's terrible when that happens. And can you imagine the press that Apple would get if they did something like that to RIM? I mean, it would be.
Yeah.
You know what I would do if I were? I would drive up to RIM's headquarters in like a bulldozer or something. And just threaten to go through the gates.
Well, you could still do that. You're closer to them.
That's true.
That would generate some publicity for the Loop.
There's actually one down the street from me, a RIM's East Coast headquarters. I should go do that.
Hey, don't I remember you getting your picture taken outside of their headquarters at one point?
I did with the only working tablet that RIM has ever seen, an iPad.
Yeah, that's it's sad, but say one word about RIM, and that's playbook.
Yeah,
and that sort of summarizes things.
But see, RIM did the exact same thing then that they did with this latest publicity stunt. They came out and said, "We're going to release the playbook. It's so much better than the iPad. It's modern tablet. It's all the technology," and they announced 4 generations of the playbook before a single one was released. And that's what prompted me first last February, a year ago February, to write that story. It just said, "Shut up and ship." Really, ship it. So they finally did, and RIM's big claim to fame is email. The playbook couldn't even do email. So what was the point?
Yeah.
All this, rattling the cages and doing all this stuff, and the press was all over them saying how this was going to kill the iPad. And I figured out at one point that Apple sold more iPads in one day than RIM shipped in 3 months.
Yeah.
You could close the show on that, Chuck.
Yeah.
That's all you need to say. I mean, really.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it's it's funny. There's some companies that you can, and we won't call any names. You can be mad at because of the way they've conducted themselves uh, in relation to Apple, in relation to their users and all. RIM, I almost have to feel sorry for because it's just like they were trying so hard with no backing and just couldn't deliver. They wanted it so bad and had it's like I would if I wanted to be a great hockey player, I have zero capacity to be a hockey player. It's just not going to happen. But they were putting on the jersey and strapping on the skates and going out, and they kept falling on their face.
Yeah,
It was sort of amazing.
it really was. And see, I don't feel sorry for them, and I don't because they brought it on themselves. I mean, they weren't honest with the public. They weren't honest with their shareholders, and ultimately the two CEOs lost their jobs. That wasn't voluntary, but they really did a lot of harm. And if they had just kept their mouth shut and said, okay, here's what we need to do, and just leave us alone, and not say anything, but they kept coming out and bragging about how good it was. And then the RIM CEO said when they questioned him about the playbook not having email, he said, "Well, our users don't think email is that important." What?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. You're just shooting yourself in the. Actually, he shot himself in the head with that. I mean, that's just ridiculous thing to say. Um, and it was like a comedy act, the two of them. I mean, Mike Lazarus in an interview with the BBC, I thought he was going to cry because they were asking him about security problems. And he said, "That's not fair. You can't do that." And I thought the man was going to cry right on camera there. Um, Oops. Jeez.
That's him knocking at your door.
Well, there, my desktop, I had my audio Pro Tools and stuff going. So
Mm.
I should be aware of that in the future.
Uh,
So yeah, I don't feel real bad for them.
yeah. So I have to ask to wrap the show, what's going on in your musical world? Because we've talked about that a number of times, and I know you're playing with new hardware and new apps and all. Are you still working on recording things to release, or is it more just now for your own pleasure?
A bit of both. I mean, I at some point I will release things. I don't know when, but I will. So I always record with an eye on, is this one of the good ones, or is this just a practice song that I'll work with. And sometimes I still find in the middle of a song there's one part that I really like, and the rest of the song sucks. So I'll take that one part out and save it, put it aside, and okay, I want to do something with this. I'll build around this and see what I come up with, and that happens. So that's what I'm doing.
Is there any chance we'll see you strap on a guitar at the party?
I don't know. I don't, I'll guarantee you one thing: I'm not going to be singing.
That may not be bad news. I'm not sure.
That is very good news for everybody with ears, because I cannot sing at all. I've tried,
Well,
and
we we share that, Jim.
well, you could get up and sing though.
If you want to clear the floor real quick, yeah,
I,
I could.
I mean, you can't really say no if I get up there and call you up. You couldn't say no.
I don't know the words, Jim.
Oh no, they have a songbook.
I can't read, Jim.
I'll read it to you.
I can't hear, Jim. I'll find something, Jim. It would be a shame to kill the first party. Hey, we got to do this more often. It's way too much fun, and I can't tell you how much we all appreciate the time.
Oh, Chuck, I love doing this with you. It's always fun.
Well, we will do it again more, and hopefully we'll talk before WWDC. But if not, knock 'em dead at the party.
Thanks.
Folks, that's Jim Dalrymple. He's the brains behind the Loop at loopinsight.com. I will have links in the show notes, obviously, to jump straight to Jim's site, where you can get regular doses of his judgments and his wisdom. Until the next time, you already know that MacNotables is the home of the Mac experts you want to hear from. We'd like to hear from you. We have live fire commenting now on the MacNotables site and Mac Voices TV site. So let us hear from you. Let us know what you think about some of the things Jim and I talked about. Until the next time, and as always, thanks for listening.
Mac Voices TV is part of the Mac Voices Group and a member of Mac Level 10.